This is Justin Gordon's finished sculpture. It is called The Watering Hole. I'm figuring that he's watering maybe the tree of life. You've got the earth, the globe inside the egg, maybe, with the leaves, and symbolizing probably watering the tree of life. And I think this guy's playing a joke on him. He's kinking up the hose so it has bubbles in it. Okay, we're at Benjamin Probanza's finished sculpture. It is called Listening to Life and Death. When we took a look at this earlier this week, we already had the face and the skull, and on the other side, the skull and the face. But he has added, you can see inside where it's cut, like 6 feet sheer up and down. Not only is it cut all the way through, he has textured those walls on the inside, which is difficult to get your hand in there and use that tool to be able to texture it and have that nice effect. And Benjamin took third place with this sculpture, which was a prize of $3,000. This is Steve Deposio's finished sculpture. It is called Phoenix Rising. We're looking at the back side of it right now. Steve didn't place with this sculpture, although it is beautiful. One of the categories that they judge on is the quality of the carving and how well they finish it. And then, does it blend, everything look the same, from start to finish? And if you go on the other side, his cuts are much deeper and darker. It appears to me that he probably was running on time and took a few shortcuts. You can also see, some areas that probably should have been smoothed out, and that's probably, he might have scored higher in a couple of categories if he had had the time to do that. Okay, this is Edith van der Wettering's piece called My Own Quiet Place. She took fourth place, which was a prize of $2,000. Beautiful piece, very simplistic, pleasing to the eye, very pleasing to the eye. And then she did add this last little feature, which kind of, I think, is very symbolic, because there's a little man sitting on the edge of that hole, and that's the hole that Edith used to climb in and out of the sculpture for the last 4 days. So it's kind of, I think that's, a little symbolic of Edith climbing in and out of that hole. Okay, we're at Joby's sculpture. It is called Let Me Spread Ink, and he won first place. He also won Sculptor's Choice. First place was a prize of $5,000. And Sculptor's Choice has no cash value, but it is very revered by the sculptures themselves. It's, it's when your fellow competitors choose their favorite piece on the beach, not taking into consideration any criteria at all. We just ask them, what's your favorite piece? And Joby won that honor this year, so he's really happy about that. It's a beautiful piece, beautiful, smooth surface, and lots of detail, cuts. It's very realistic, even though you see all the designs, which would, obviously an octopus would not have these designs. But the general shape of the head of the octopus itself is beautiful. You can see the opening. I'm not sure what they're called, but very realistic on the sides. You come around to the back, and we talked on one of the first days about the shark inside, and that he was still doing a little research to get some reference. As you can see now, here the shark is finished, and it has a bottle in its mouth. After talking to Joby, after he won, we all kind of discussed, and what did that piece really mean to you? And Joby always has an ecological message, and he had just read somewhere about sharks eating the octopus. And this is just symbolic of maybe it's time for the octopus to eat the shark. I'm not sure, but it's it's just again a message that Joby always likes to give an ecological message to his sculptures. Okay, we're at Marianne van der Broek's site, and her sculpture is called Into the Fold. And after talking to Marianne last night, her story was a boy got an F on a test, and he took the paper and folded it up to make a gorilla, because he would have more fun doing that than taking a test. And it's kind of cute, because she's got, all the writing that would have been on the paper, and it's all in different places as the boy folded it up. And I got a kick out of over here. It just brought back some you know, childhood memories about tests and the T and the F for true and false. It just, some thought definitely went into this, and I think it's cute. Okay, we are at Dan Belcher's sculpture called Breaking Out. Dan won second place, which was a cash prize of $4,000. Very powerful here with the motion of the man and the pulling. It's well usage of sand. He's got degree of difficulty. You look at it and it has all the elements and fits all the criteria that they do judge on. It was very close between Joby and Dan. Dan, didn't lose that by that much to Joby, but it's a beautiful piece. Yeah, I really like it. Okay, we're at Sumi Gru's sculpture, and it's titled Imprinted. I really like this. This one speaks to me. I thought Sue would place. I'm not really sure. We'll know when we look at the graph. We take all the criteria that they judge on, and we make a graph. And, it shows each criteria, how high and low they were, and opposed to their fellow competitors. So I think it's going to be just a couple of things that determine the difference between Sue and Edith. Sue did come in just a few points behind Edith, who was fourth place. But I really liked this piece. It spoke to me. I thought it was beautiful. Just the subtle tilt of the heads was really nice and very pleasing to the eye. I really liked this one. You can see an effect in Sue's sculpture that I haven't noticed in any of the others, but there are these striations going horizontally across the sculpture. Those aren't cracks. Those aren't any problem with the sculpture. What that is when they're doing their pound up, they throw in sand and water and mix it up. Then they have to get out of the box, shovel in more sand and more water. And as the sand and water, as it settles, the clay, the natural clay in the sand kind of rises to the top. So that is just the striate. That's just the level of where she stopped and got out of the box and started shoveling more sand in. Okay, we are at Dan Doubleday's sculpture, and you'll remember that Dan had a devastating collapse almost at the end of the last day, and he only had 5 hours to complete this sculpture compared to the 30 hours that the other sculptors had. So obviously the degree of difficulty, he didn't have time to do another pound up, so he had to use the sand pile that he had and work with that. There was just no time to do a pound up. So, of course, he doesn't score many points on degree of difficulty. There's no overhangs or undercuts. He was able to get a face in there and some sense of humor. That's, if you notice, her tail over here is broken off, and he's got the piece of tail in his hand. Okay, we're at Chris Ginto's sculpture. It is called The Wasteland. Chris has a wonderful sense of humor, and he's always ribbing all the other sculptors, and, it's fun, and they rib each other back. But this is really a nice piece. Chris has a tendency to sometimes not finish and bite off a little bit more than he can chew, but he did do a lot of detail. It popped. It was really nice. Everybody was happy with the outcome of Chris's sculpture, although he did not place. And if you look at the other sculptures, you can see why. His usage of sand is pretty minimal, but that's what happens when you sacrifice and use a lot of time for detail. It takes up a lot of time. One thing that Chris did do that was kind of clever, and it has a nice effect to it, is you can see the sand. It doesn't look like the chopped up sand and the fluffed up sand that some of the other sculptors do at the bottom of their sculpture. He wanted it to actually look like a desert. So he took the natural beach sand that was totally dry and just kind of shoveled and sprinkled it on the top. And this is the way the wind would naturally erode in the desert. This is what it would naturally look like. And he created that without the wind. Okay, we're at Amazing Walter's sculpture. It is called Step Up. And Amazing Walter was the winner of the People's Choice Award, which was $1,000. One of the interesting things is that the people love castles, and they can relate to it because they all tried to build a castle when they were a child, and it didn't work. So to them, that's a difficult thing to do. And so when they come out and they see a castle like this, they're awed. But when you take into the criteria that the sculptors use to do the judging, you will notice the different categories that he probably did not score as well on with the actual judges. Some unfinished lines and areas that there's really nothing was done to, that would be where he would score not as high in those different categories. I will note that Walter's outhouse is present, and it is that little spot that I was wondering one of the first days whether that was going to be the outhouse or not. So there you can see Walter's outhouse. Okay, we're at Wilfred Steiger's sculpture. It is called Moving In. I had no idea where he was going with this when he first, started it, and it wasn't until the very end when he put the snail's head and, the rest of his body and curling around down to the tail that it made sense. And it's very, very clever, and it has some really nice features to it. The cut-throughs in the bottom, a lot of intricacy down in there with all the holes coming and going and finding themselves at another opening. That takes, does have a lot of weight on top of that too, where all those cut-throughs are. So I'm sure he did score high in degree of difficulty. Again, we won't know until we take a look at the graphs what the difference was. A lot of these sculptures were very close. There wasn't much separating them, and it'll be a category they'll find that made the difference for them. One category probably that they didn't do so well in that would make the difference between placing and not placing. Okay, we're at Rusty's sculpture, and it is called Peace of Mind. I like this. It's very pleasing to the eye. I like the way he did the forced perspective on the building and the trees and the road. There's a lot of detail in the buildings that takes up a lot of time. And again, there's so few things that separate one sculpture from another. I think probably when we look at the criteria, you'll see that Rusty will score low in usage of sand. He has a whole area off to the side over here that was part of his pile that didn't even end up getting used. So I'm sure that'll be the category that hurt Rusty. If you remember, the first day Rusty started carving, he noticed that he had a crack at the top of the sculpture, and then he made it through the night, but the next morning he took the sculpture back about 6 or 7 inches to take some of that weight off, and that took some time too. He had to sacrifice some time to do that. But if you'll notice right now, the competition is all over, everything is said and done, but he does have that crack is reappearing up on the top. The sand is drying out. He probably did a little bit more cutting on the inside after we, spoke about him repairing it and taking that weight back. Yeah, the crack has now kind of come all the way around to the front. Usually, though, when it gets to this point and it's been up this long and it hasn't collapsed, it's really just, maybe more of a stress thing and it's shifting and moving. But after it dries, it really doesn't shift and move anymore. So it probably will stay just like that. If you walk around to the back of Rusty's piece, you'll remember that he did have a bunch of sand that was nothing. It was just a bunch of sand up against the back. Now it makes sense. This is his head, and that's his ear. And when you go around to the other side and you see the trees and the house, and that's what's going on inside his brain. And he has peace of mind. I do notice, though, now that I come around to the back, the ear, you can see a lot of marks around the edges, and almost looks like it was kind of pasted on there, not really carved, not finished well. And I'm sure that'll probably be one of the categories, the quality of carving, that he will not score as high on as well. Okay, we're at Lucinda Waringa's sculpture. It's called Encroachment, and there's a mermaid here holding a shark. Yeah, at first I thought she was carving a dolphin, but now that I see it completed, it is a shark. She did, it looks like she might have run out of time. Some of the lines aren't as clean. You'll notice you don't want to compare one sculpture to another because they're all so different. It's like apples and oranges. But when you look at technique things, you can see certain areas where lines aren't as smooth, cuts aren't as deep. And that does come into play when they take that into consideration when they're doing the judging. Okay, we're at the last sculpture, and this is Sandis Kondrat's from Latvia. The sculpture is called Soundwave. this is kind of funny and ironic. I'm not sure if Sandus had this in mind, but he is the site that is the closest to the stage. And he has been hearing the music every day when the music starts, and it's kind of loud down here. So I don't know if that had anything to do with the inspiration of his sculpture, but it's fun. I like it. And it's also very pleasing. It's a lot of smooth, clean surfaces. And I like it. It's his first time here, his first time using this sand, and I think he represented Latvia very well. Ben is dismantling the water system. What he's doing is he's cutting it in the middle of every 10-foot pipe. And then next year we'll store this in the bin, and then next year when we come back, we'll just add a coupling right there at that seam. Well, we're ready to close the bin, and as you can see, it looks a little bit different closing it up this year than it did when we opened it up. By using our new water system, we got rid of all those white barrels that took up over half the bin. We now have all the new forms in here as well. That's 50% more forms, and you can see our piping right here is all ready to go for next year. All we need is new couplings, and that'll be ready to go. Well, until 2014, this is another year. Love that sound. Wrapping it up. Ben's really the one that locks it. I don't do that. It's much too strenuous, and I can't do it. Nick? Want to give Ben a hand? Everybody, give Ben a hand. Come on, help him out there. This is not an easy thing to do. I'm surprised Ben hasn't lost a toe one of these years. Come on, give it some hip there, Ben. You have to know that these bins sit in the city yard all year. They go through the freezing winter, rain, storms. They get all rusty.
You need a new one.
We need to get the axe out from inside and use that. Come on, Nick.
I give up. I did it twice.
Yay! There it is. Thank you, Ben. Till 2014. Bye.